Assalamu alaikum. This is lecture number 25 of Global Business Management. Today we are going to discuss two topics. The first one is global marketing and product development, which we have discussed in last two lectures, and we are going to finish this topic today. And then we are going to start a new topic, a new chapter, which is global production, outsourcing and logistics. We have three learning objectives for today's lecture. The first one is understand how do regulations influence pricing, and the second learning objective is become familiar with the important influence that operations management can have on the competitive position of an international business. Understand how country differences, manufacturing technology and product features all affect the choice of where to locate production operations. These are the three learning objectives we have today. The first one belongs to the first or previous chapter, and the second learning objective and the third one is belong to the production, operation and outsourcing. Okay, we quickly go through the main points of the last lecture. We had discussed about the effectiveness of firms' international communication strategy and what are those factors which can affect international communication. The first barrier is cultural barrier. It can be difficult to communicate messages across cultures. And we had discussed in the last lecture that how cultural differences come across in communication when firm trying to send message about its product across different markets, how the same message can be interpreted differently in different markets. The second one is source and country of origin effects. Source effects occurs when a receiver of the message evaluate the message on the basis of status or image of the sender, can counter negative source effect by de-emphasizing their foreign origins. What are the impression consumer have about the origin of that product? For instance, if we are using the product of India, what are the impression we are going to get while buying that product, first of all? And what if we are buying the product from USA and Israel and Germany, some other? For each country we have the different impression, different image in our mind, which is called the source effect, source of the country of origin effects. It can be positive and negative. Positive in these are the things like India or Israel or this sort of country, or if we talk about for instance, if we are talking about the technology and we intend to buy some products, some electronic products, then and we have the option of a product of a TV made in Japan, and the second option is made in Vietnam, then of course we are going to prefer the product from the Japan, because we have the positive impact, positive source country of origin effect about upon that they have the better technology. Similar, these things goes for the French wine or Italian clothes, the designers, and the German luxury cars. Country of origin affects the extent to which the place of manufacturing influence the product evaluation. Anti-Japan wave in US. These are the famous example of the country of origin effects. And the third one is the noise levels, the amount of other messages competing for a potential consumer's attention. Noise level affects in this way that imagine a scenario where several companies trying to sell a similar product in a same market, and each company is trying to send its message. And what if and it's very common in our country, in our markets we have seen that when the several companies are sending a similar message, the effect of those messages nullify by each other's messages, by each other's advertisement strategies. This is called noise effects, and the noise level is higher if there is a high competition within the market, and noise level is low similarly if the competition is low in the market. Firms have to choose between two types of communication strategy. Okay, there are two types of communication strategies. The first one is called push strategy, and the second one is called the pull strategy. Push strategy is the choice between a strategy depends. The first one, the push strategy emphasizes personal selling, and the pull strategy emphasizes mass media advertisement. Through mass media, they are trying to attract, they are trying to lure the customers to come and buy those products. And on the other hand, personal selling, rather than pulling, they are pushing those products towards the customers. The choice between the pull and push strategy depends on product type and consumer sophistication. To what extent, what are the type of the products, and to what extent the customers are sophisticated in terms of their education and in terms of their demand, technological advancements, demands of technological advancements. A pull strategy works well for firms in consumer goods selling to a large market segment. On the other hand, a push strategy works well for industrial products. The second factor is the channel length. If the channel, there are two types. The channel can be short, channel length can be shorter, and the channel length can be a longer one as well. A pull strategy works better with the longer distribution channel. Media availability. The third point is media availability. Okay, in general, a push strategy is better for industrial products or complex new products. And the second thing is when push strategy is feasible when distribution channel is short. And the third one is when few print or electronic media is available, but media is very limited. And on the other hand, if you talk about the pull strategy is better for consumer goods product, and when distribution channels are long, when sufficient print and electronic media are available to carry a marketing message. And the last thing is price discrimination that we had studied. And then the price discrimination occurs when firms charge consumer in different countries different prices for the same product. On the basis of market conditions and on the basis of competition, on the basis of demand of those products, firms can charge differently in different market of same product. But there is another important thing is if the information about that, if the consumer are in position to compare the prices across the market, that will affect negatively on the firms. Okay, now we continue talking about the strategic pricing. Strategic pricing has three aspects. The first one is predatory pricing. Predatory prices is the profit gain in one market to support aggressive pricing designed to drive competitor out in the market. Okay, predatory pricing market it is like this. Then when a firm set a price really low to drive out its competitor from that market. How that firm can set prices very low compared to their competitors? There is one way. They are saying this. For instance, there is a US company which is operating in India and China. Firm can make more profit from China by setting a regular price in Chinese market and use that profit in Indian firm, in Indian subsidiary, use that profit, just switch and transfer that profit, that money from Chinese subsidiary to Indian subsidiary, and use that profit as a backup to set the low prices in the Indian market to drive out of the competitors from the Indian market. Once the competitor is gone from the market, then in the subsequent years or subsequent periods, firm can charge high, and because they don't have the competition. After competitors have left, the firm will raise prices on higher profit. That's how they make. And then at that time, when they don't have the competitor, they can set whatever the price they want, and that will be a predatory price. Okay, multi-point pricing. A firm's pricing strategy in one market may have an impact on a rival's pricing strategy in another market. Multi-point strategy. A firm's pricing strategy in one market may have impact on a rival's pricing strategy in another market. If we continue talking about the same US firm who got the foreign subsidiaries in India and China, the price that they set in Chinese market, that price of that subsidiary will affect on the prices of Indian firms who are the competitor of Indian subsidiary of US company. Important point in this multi-point pricing is managers should centrally monitor the pricing decision. These managers should aware of the pricing strategies, or what are the prices the competitor using in the other markets where they have the subsidiaries, where they have the foreign operations. Okay, experience curve pricing. Price low worldwide in an attempt to build a global sales volume as rapidly as possible, even if this means taking large losses initially. Initially, it shows that with the passage of time, the cost of the production goes down, and that curve is the experience curve. On the experience curve, what happens might be in the beginning to get the market share, firms can set a really low prices. And when and of course when they are setting the really low prices, even in the beginning of this experience curve, when they don't have the cost of production very low, they will experience losses. But with the passage of time, gradually they can, when the cost of production goes down, even with the same price, they will start earning the profit. Firms that are further along with the experience curve have a cost advantage relative to firms further up to the curve. It's obvious that firms that are locating on the top of the experience curve, they have the higher production cost, and firms which are locating in the down in the experience curve, they have the low production cost. And it's again obvious that the firms who are getting higher production cost, the profit margin will be low for them and as compared to the who are locating in the who are locating relatively further down in the experience curve. How do regulations influence pricing? A firm's ability to set prices may be limited by anti-dumping regulations. What is anti-dumping prices? Anti-dumping occurs when a firm sells a product for a price that is less than the cost of its producing it. For instance, if there is, for instance, a Chinese company, a Pakistani company. There is a Pakistani company. If take the consideration of Pakistani company who is making the one pair of jeans, one pair of shoes. We could say pair of shoes. It costs them to produce it 1,000 rupees. Imagine a scenario: the Chinese company is making the same shoe and start selling in the Pakistan with the price of 800 rupees. A Pakistani firm cannot beat that price, because even for Pakistani firm it takes 1,000 rupees even to produce that shoe. This is called the anti-dumping prices. And what the government can do, regulators can do to stop this thing, they can set some threshold. They can, for instance, in this example, they can set a threshold that no firm can sell this sort of shoes below a price below than 1,400. Then even if the Chinese firm starts selling that product, they cannot sell below than 1,400. And when they do that, when they are going to start selling 1,400, even Pakistani firm can do that, sell with the 1,400, and even in that case they are making the 400 rupees profit on each pair. The second one is competition policy. Most industrialized nations have regulations designed to promote competition and restrict monopoly practices, can limit the prices that a firm can charge. Okay, competition policy mean firms, the governments can stop, are going to make such policy which stop monopolistic behavior within the market. And especially in the Western world, they try to, because in the monopolistic market, the companies, or oligopolistic market, the companies can get the power to set the prices, and the quantity and the prices are decided by the companies. And government regulations try to stop this sort of behavior within the market. Okay, standardization versus customization is, okay, how should firms configure the marketing mix? What sort of marketing mix they should use? Standardization versus customization is not an all or nothing concept. Most firms standardize some things and customize others. Firms should consider the cost and benefits of standardizing or customizing each element of the marketing mix. Firms, they have the choice. Either they can use the standardization of the marketing strategy, this marketing mix. They can use the same standardization. They can use the same marketing, this production strategy across the market. And the second thing is, to certain extents, certain aspects, they can use the of marketing mix across the countries, across the markets, and certain elements they are going to customize according to the demands of the local market. Firms should consider the cost and benefits of the standardizing and customizing each element of the marketing mix. But important thing is, when they are going to select and they have to make a choice between standardization and customization, they have to see they have to calculate the cost and benefit of both strategies. If the cost is higher for standardization, then they have to go for the customization, and the vice versa. And the final thing is, when they are going to use the mix strategy between the customization and the standardization, then the cost, there will be a trade-off between certain aspects of standardization and certain aspects of customization, and there will be a well-balanced optimal level of profit they are going to make through this mix strategy. Why is new product development is important? Product innovation, now we are talking about the innovation, we are talking about R&D. Product innovation should be the strategic priority. Today, a competition is much about the technological innovation as anything else. Why product innovation should be a strategic priority? Now we are talking about that, why firms have to spend money on the R&D, why they have to innovate new products, and what is the significance of this innovation. Now they are saying this, that in the competitive world, competition is so high that only those firms can survive, sustain in the market, who are going to introduce new products in the market, and who are, especially if we talk about the high-tech sector, like pharmaceutical, like software, .com industries, these sort of things are biotechnology. In these sectors, innovation is very important, and firms who have the innovative capabilities, they have this competitive advantage over their competitors. The pace of technological change is faster than ever, and product life cycles are often very short. Now we as we are observing around us, that if we see that mobiles, how quickly companies are introducing new mobiles. What about the computer? How quickly they are introducing new computers, these iPads, even the cars. How quickly nowadays the companies are introducing new cars within the market. And that it means that the product life cycle is really short nowadays compared to the few decades ago. New innovation can make existing products obsolete, but at the same time open the door to host on new opportunities. Okay, Though there is some positive aspects and negative aspect with the new innovation, though when the companies innovate new products, the old products get obsolete from the market. But on the other hand, these new products brings new growth opportunities for the companies as well. Firms need close links between R&D, marketing, and manufacturing. The firms have to establish a close link between the innovation, which will be brought through R&D, marketing, and manufacturing. Whatever they are going to invent, the marketing department, the manufacturing department is going to build that, and the marketing department is going to advertise it. Why should R&D be located? Where should R&D be located? This is an important thing. Where they should locate. New product ideas come from the interaction of scientific research, demand conditions, and the competitive conditions. The rate of new product development is greater in countries where more money is spent on basic and applied research and development. Demand is strong, consumers are affluent, and competition is intense. Okay, now we are talking about what are those situations or conditions which facilitate R&D, and we are seeing this thing that R&D is companies more often do innovate the products in markets where more money is spent on basic and applied research, and the demand is strong. Demand is strong means the consumer is demanding high, like we had discussed the example of the Nokia and Ericsson. The demands in those companies, in those markets in Scandinavia was really high from those companies to innovate something new, to bring new features in their mobile devices. And because of that demand, they were forced to invent new things, and that's why they are leading producer of the cellular phones. Consumer are influenced. They have money to buy. They have the buying power. Competition is intense. If the fourth condition is when the competition is really intense, then firms are forced to invent something new. On the other hand, if the competition is very low, what is going to happen? Firms have already established the market share, then they don't need to. Might be they are not going to invest money on innovation. Rather, what they are going to see some other opportunities, some other ways to increase the market base. But they are not going to invent something new or bring something new in the market, because the other firms, there are not so many firms in the market, and competition is very low. How can R&D, marketing, and production be integrated? As we have in the last slides, we have read one sentence that R&D, marketing, and manufacturing should be integrated. Since new product development has a high failure rate, new product development efforts should involve close coordination between R&D, marketing, and production. Integration will ensure that customers need drive product development. Customer needs drive product development. How we are going to know about the customer needs? Through marketing, right? And product development will comes under production. New products are designed for ease of manufacturing. New products are designed through R&D for ease of manufacture. For ease of manufacture, for the development costs are kept in check. If the cost of development of those designed or new products are really high, then it will be difficult for firms to invest so big money in that sort of development. Time to market is minimized. The fourth point is time to market is minimized. Time what time they are going to, is it taking so long to invent something new, get the feedback from the customer, what sort of designs and what sort of requirement they are expecting from the companies. This will come from the marketing department, and how long it will take to produce in the production unit, and the second in between thing is how long it will take to invent that thing and then to manufacture it. The time, that's why the time factor is really important, and it should be minimum. Cross-functional integration is facilitated by cross-functional product development teams. Cross-functional mean we are talking about the cross-functional integration mean across marketing, across R&D, and across production. Cross-functional integration is facilitated by cross-functional product development team. This cross-functional product development team should be comprised of marketing people, R&D people, and production people. Effective cross-sectional teams should be led by a heavyweight project manager with status in the organization. This is the first requirement. They are saying that a project manager should have a higher status in the organization. Include members from all the critical functional areas. I mean, it should have the representation of all the departments. Have members located together. They should work closely and should be located at the same point, at the same center. Establish clear goals. They should know what they are trying to build there. Develop an effective conflict resolution process, because people belong to a different department, different orientations, different thoughts, and they have the different goals might be in their mind, but there should be some effective conflict resolution mechanism, and which will help to resolve the conflict within the team members. How can firms build global R&D capabilities? To adequately commercialize new technologies, firms need to integrate R&D and marketing. In R&D and marketing, again, marketing is going to get the feedback from the market, and R&D is going to the expectation of the market, and R&D is going to build that thing, and then they are marketing people again. They are going to send that products to the market, and they are going to see the feedback of the users. To successfully commercialize new technologies, firms may need to develop different versions of different countries. To successfully commercialize new technology, firms may need to develop different strategies. Might be they have to develop different versions for the different market according to the need, demands, and values and cultural things. These things should consider. Firms should consider these elements, and because of those elements, firms have to develop different versions of the same product across the markets. So a firm may need R&D centers in North Africa, Asia, and Europe that are closely linked by formal and informal integrating mechanism with marketing operations in each country in these regions, and with the various manufacturing facilities. Important thing is, wherever they are operating, they should be interlinked with each other, and especially their marketing and R&D division should be integrated, and they should know that what are the cultural market differences, contextual differences across the markets, and those elements should be considered in the manufacturing of that new products. Okay, now let's talk about the global production, outsourcing, and logistics. This is our new chapter, and international firms must answer 5 interrelated questions. The first one is, where should production activities be located? What should be the long-term strategic role of foreign production sites? Should the firm own foreign production activities, or it is better to outsource those activities to independent vendors? How should a globally dispersed supply chain be managed? And what is the role of internet-based information technology in the management of global logistics? Should the firm manage global logistics itself, or should it outsource the management to enterprises that specialize in that activity? Now we are talking about few elements. In the first question, we are talking about the location. Firm production location. Firm have to answer this question, that where they should where the production facility should be located. Okay, and the second one is, what is the long-term strategic role of that foreign production site if they are going in the foreign market? then what's the role of that for a production side, and should the firm own product, and the third one is what should be the ownership type. Should they own a wholly owned subsidiary, or they should make a joint venture with another company, or licensing, or something else, some other mode of entry they should use for the production. How should a globally dispersed supply chain manager manage? Okay, if the supply chain manager and they are operating in a different market, how the supply chain management will be managed across the markets? Should the firm manage global logistics itself? Okay, and the last point is how the global supply chain management should be managed. Either they can outsource this thing or they can manage themselves. These are the different options they have to think about. Strategy, production and logistics. Firms need to identify how production and logistics can be conducted internationally. We are talking about two things: production and logistics. Lower the cost of the value creation can be connected to add value by better serving customer needs. These are two elements, important elements, when we are talking about and when we are thinking about production and logistics. Production and logistics are closely linked, since firm's ability to perform its production activities efficiently depends on the timely supply of high quality material input. We are talking about the logistics, we are talking about the production, how they are interlinked with each other. In order to produce some products in time, it is necessary for the company to have those raw materials, these material what they are going to use for the production. That material should reach in the production facility on time, and so once the material reached on time, the production process will finish in time as well. Production refers to activities involved in creating a product. Logistics refer to the procurement and physical transmission of material through the supply chain from supplier to customers. We are talking about logistics raw material from supplier to the company, and when the product is completed, then those products, these logistics again take those products from manufacturer to customers, from both ends, from the front end and the back end. We are talking about those things. This is called the logistics. To lower cost, firm can disperse production to those locations where activities can be performed most efficiently, manage the global supply chain efficiently to better match supply and demand. Okay, the first one, in order to reduce the cost of production, firm can disperse production to several locations to reduce the cost of production. But the problem is, once the production facilities are located in different regions, in the different markets, then the logistics point, a supply chain point of view, this element, this dimension is very important. How these production facilities or locations are interlinked with each other, and how they are on same time, they are on page, and the globally supply chain efficiently, how they are more efficiently, they are interlinked with each other, and how efficiently to better match supply and demand of the market. To improve quality, firms can eliminate defective products from the supply chain and the manufacturing process. Okay, the first one, and to improve quality will also reduce cost. Okay, the first point we have read about lower the cost, they have to do two things, and to improve the quality, they have to they can do the two things: eliminate defective products from the supply chain and the manufacturing process. And the next one is improve quality. When their firm are going to improve the quality, of course, the cost of production will automatically go down. These both two objectives, to lower the cost and to improve the quality, are interlinked with each other. Increasing productivity, because this time is not wasted producing poor quality products that cannot be sold, leading to a direct reduction in unit costs. Lowering rework and scrap costs associated with defective products. reducing the warranty cost and time associated with fixing defective product. Now we are talking about when how the quality, improving the quality can reduce the cost. Improving quality is when the defective material are not producing in a big numbers. Of course, the unit per cost is reduced. Second one is lowering the rework and the scrap cost associated with the defective products. The third one is when the defective products are not produced in a large number, the warranty cost will be reduced as well. Strategy, production and logistics. To increase the product quality, most firms today use the Six Sigma program, which aims to reduce defects, boost productivity, eliminate waste and cut costs throughout a company. Six Sigma program. Six Sigma are direct descendants of the Total Quality Management program and has a goal of improving product quality. In European Union, firm must meet the standards set forth by ISO 9000 before the firm is allowed to access the European market. These are the additional thing ISO 9000, which is only applicable in the European Union. Before firms intend to enter or sell their products within the European market, they have to follow the ISO 9000 standards. The Total Quality Management philosophy was developed by a number of American consultants such as W. Edwards Deming, Joseph Jurgen, and A.V. Feigenbaum. Deming identified a number of steps that should be included in any TQM program. Management should embrace the philosophy that mistakes, defects, and poor quality material are not accepted. Supervisors should work more with employees and provide them with the tools they need to do the job. Management should create an environment in which employees will not fear reporting problems. Work standards should not only be defined as number or quotas, but should include some notion of quality. Production processes operating at Six Sigma are 99.99% accurate, only 3.5 defects per million units. Now Deming are identifying, these scholars, the American scholars are identifying certain conditions, some certain steps in order to follow the TQM program. And they are saying that when they are following the Six Sigma program, the success rate is 99.99%, that the production and the products will be accurate and with the high quality. Only 3.5 defects per million units will be identified. International companies have two other important production and logistic objectives. Production and logistic function must be able to accommodate demands for local responsiveness. Production and logistic must be able to respond quickly to shift the consumer demand. Okay, production and logistics, there are two more important jobs for the production and logistic department. The first one is they have to consider the local market demand, and if they are demanding or expecting something different from the product, then they should be quick to respond to that demand. And the first one is they should know the demand and they should be able to accommodate those demand in the products. And the second one is they should be quick in response of those demands. Demands for local responsiveness arises from the national differences in consumer taste and preferences, infrastructure, distribution channel, and host government demands. Demands for local responsiveness create pressure to decentralize production activities to the major national or regional market in which the firm does business, or to implement flexible manufacturing process that enable the firms to customize the product coming out of the factory according to the market in which it is to be sold. In recent years, time-based competition has grown more important. When the consumer demand is prone to large and unpredictable shifts, the firm can be adapt more quickly to these shifts. And the first point, it says that these demands, from where they are, these demands are raising. These demands are raising from because each market have different taste, the consumer have different taste, they have different preferences, their values are different, might be because the infrastructure is different in that market, distribution channel, the length of distribution channel is different, and the demand from the host government, the government where firm is operating, the demand from the government is different across the markets, and these differences creates the different demand in different markets, and firm have to respond to those demands. The second thing is local responsiveness create pressure to decentralize, and because of these demands from each market, it raises the pressure, it creates the pressure on the firms to decentralize the production facilities. Rather than doing the centralized production facility and they are producing in the one region, like for instance if we talk about the Southeast Asia, might be they will produce their products in India, and then they are going to sell to the all Pakistani, Bangladesh, Sri Lankan and Bhutan, Maldives, these region. This is the one option. The second option is because each country is demanding differently, might be the Pakistani people have the different demand, or because of the infrastructure, like the Maldives and Nepal, they have the different infrastructure, the mountain, infrastructure is different, and within the India the culture values are different across the countries. Within the country these are huge difference, and because of these sort of high demands or differences in the demands, it creates the pressure on the companies to, rather than only producing the product in India, they will decentralize the production and they will produce the stuff in each market, in each countries differently. In recent years, time-based competition has grown more important, and the time-based competition has been gaining the importance in recent years. Okay, where to produce? Now there are three factors to decide where companies are going to produce. The first factor is country factor, the second one is technological factors, and third one is product factors. Country factors. Firm should locate manufacturing activities in those locations where economic, political and cultural conditions, including relative factor cost, are more conducive to the performance of that activity. Country factors that can affect location decisions include the availability of skilled labor and supporting industries, formal and informal trade barriers, expectations about future exchange rate changes, transportation costs, regulations affecting FDI. These are the different country level factors which are really influential in the decision of location. Might be the availability of skilled labor, that's the first one, and the sporting industry. Like very common thing is that the computer industry in the US, why they got the success, the first important factor was they have the skilled labor, and the second thing is they have the sporting, very well developed sporting industries in semiconductors, sporting industries, which facilitated the main industry of computer industries. Formal and informal trade barriers, formal and informal trade barriers should be very low. Then the firm can choose to go in those markets. Transportation cost should be lower, and the expectation about future exchange rate changes, there should be, the exchange currency should be a bit stable. If the currency is stable, then the firm can choose to go in those markets. The last one is the regulation. If the countries have some regulatory, really stringent regulations in those markets, companies will not prefer to go in those markets. Okay, this is a very good case study of Philips. Why Philips chose to go to China. There are some location factors and the country factors. Let's read quickly from the main points of that small case study. The Dutch consumer electronics, lighting, semiconductor and medical equipment conglomerate, Philips. The conglomerate is like a company which got operations in several unrelated businesses, like we can say the Tata, they have conglomerate, this Fuji Group, They are a conglomerate. They are operating in cement. They are operating in banking, insurance. They are operating in several other industries, unrelated industries that they are considering an conglomerate. Philips Electronics NV has been operating factories in China since 1985, when the country first opened its market to foreign investors. Then China was seen as the land of ultimate demand, and Philips, like many other Western companies, dreamed of Chinese consumers snapping up its products by the millions. But the company soon found out that one of the big reasons the company liked China, the low wage rates, also meant that few Chinese workers could afford to buy the products they were producing. Chinese wage rates are currently important thing is, despite they are getting the benefit of low wage rate, right? They are paying less. But on the other hand, they are facing this dilemma because people are not getting so much salaries. They don't have the buying power, and whatever they are producing, these Philips, the home appliance system, they can produce it with a cheap labor, with the low cost, but they cannot sell it in China because people don't have the buying power, because they have the small salaries, low salaries. Okay. Chinese wage rates are currently 1/3 of those in Mexico and Hungary, and 5% of those in the United States and Japan. So Philips hit on a new strategy: keep the factories in China but export most of the goods to the United States and elsewhere. That's the perfect strategy, because despite the Chinese market have a big potential, they have the big consumer market, big numbers in billions, but even then they don't have a buying power. Whatever the Philips did, what the strategy they chose, they were producing in China, but they are exporting those products exporting back to the Europe or USA. The company now operates 25 wholly owned subsidiaries and joint ventures in China. Together, they employ some 30,000 people. Philips exports nearly 2/3 of the $7 billion in products that our factories produce every year. Philips accelerated its Chinese investment in anticipation of the Chinese entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001. The company plans to move even more production to China in the future. In 2003, Philips announced it would phase out production of electronic razors in the Netherlands, lay off 2,000 Dutch employees, and move production to China by 2005. A week earlier, Philips had stated that it would expand capacity as its semiconductor factories in China while phasing out production in higher cost locations elsewhere. And they are moving away their production facility from their home country, from Netherlands to China, because of the cheap labor. And parallelly they are expanding the existing facilities in China. The attractions of China to Philips include containing low wage rates, an educated workforce, a robust Chinese economy, a stable exchange rate that is pegged to the US dollar, a rapidly expanding industrial base that include many other Western Chinese companies that Philips uses as suppliers, and easier access to the world market given Chinese entry into the World Trade Organization. Philips has stated that ultimately its goal is to run China into a global supply base from which the company's products will be exported around the world. By the mid-2000s, more than 25% of everything Philips have made worldwide came from China. The executives say the figure is rising rapidly. Several products such as CD and DVD players are now made only in China. Philips is also starting to give its Chinese factories a greater role in product development. In the TV business, for example, basic development used to occur in Holland but was moved to Singapore in the early 90s. Now Philips is transferring TV development work to a new R&D center in Suzhou near Shanghai. Similarly, basic product development work on LCD screens for cell phones was recently shifted to Shanghai. In the beginning they had just shifted their production because of those cheap labor and the standard robust economy and the stable exchange rate and the rapidly increasing growth of or industrial development of Chinese market. But later on they have also shifted their R&D facilities in China as well. Some observers worry that Philips and the companies pursuing a similar strategy might be overdoing it. Too much dependence on China would be dangerous if political, economic and other problems disrupt production and the company's ability to supply global markets. Some observers believe that it might be better if the manufacturing facilities of the companies were more geographically diverse as a hedge against problems in China. Now the critics they are saying that the companies like Philips, they shouldn't invest too much in they shouldn't invest too much in the China, because if something wrong happens, their all investment will be affected. Rather, what they should do, diversify their investment and to hedge the risk associated with investment only in one market. The fears of the critics were given some substance in early 2003 when an outbreak of the pneumonia-like SARS virus in China resulted in the temporary shutdown of several plants operated by the foreign companies and disrupted their global supply chains. Although the Philips was not directly affected, it did restrict travel by its managers and engineers to its Chinese plants. Like the people who are giving some observation and they are really reluctant to invest in China, they were saying that the things what happened with when the outbreak of the virus in Chinese market, because of that thing, the several production facilities they were shut down, and if something happened similarly in the future, it can affect the production of those firms. Okay, now the suggested questions that you are going to think about is, what makes China such as attractive production location for Philips? Are there other locations that share the same characteristics? This is the first question. And the next one is, and you are going to discuss this point from this point of view. Several factors make China attractive location, and we have discussed these points in the previous slide, that the cheap labor and the strong market and the growth of the Chinese market and exchange rate. Philips want to eventually turn China into a global supply base from which its product will be exported around the world. Consider the advantage and disadvantage of this strategy. Now you are going to think about their plans, Philips plans. They intend to make China as a global supply base, and from China they are going to produce the products there and they are going to export around the world. What are the advantages and disadvantages of this philosophy, and in what dimensions you are going to think? You are going to think about several dimensions, like the discussion points suggest few directions. Students should recognize that using China as a global supply base from which to serve the world offer several advantages to the Philips. By having a single production location, the company can capitalize on cost saving that come from economy of scale as well as the low wages in China. However, if economic, political and other type of problems arise in the country, Philips would be in serious trouble if it has no alternative location to fill the production gap. We are going to talk about the advantage and both the advantages and disadvantages of locating or making the global supply base, China as a global supply base. Now the next factor is technological factors. What type of technology firm uses in its manufacturing can affect location decisions. Three characteristics of a manufacturing technology are of interest: level of fixed cost, the minimum efficient scale, the flexibility of the technology. These are the three levels. The level of fixed cost. If the fixed cost of setting up a manufacturing plant are high, it might make sense to serve the world market from a single location. Okay. If the fixed cost of producing the products are really high, then it's obvious to centralize the production and produce the products in one location and export to the other markets. That's the obvious thing, if the fixed cost associated with the production is really high. When the fixed costs are relatively low, multiple production plants are possible. Producing in multiple locations allows firms to respond to local markets and reduce dependency on a single market. On the other hand, if the production fixed cost is really low, then they can produce the stuff in different markets and different locations. While producing in different market will allow manufacturer to respond to the demands of local market. The next one is the minimum efficient scale. The larger the minimum efficient scale, the minimum efficient scale is defined as the lowest production point at which the long-run total average cost are minimized of a plant. The more likely centralized production in a single location or the limited number of locations makes sense. A low minimum efficient scale allows the firm to, low efficient scale is the lowest production point at which average costs are minimal, long run total average costs are minimized. And low minimum efficient scale allows the firm to respond to a local market demand and hedge against currency risk. Hedge means we have already done to get a shelter against currency risk by operating in multiple locations. We have already done this thing that the more likely centralized production in a single location or a limited number of locations makes sense. When minimum efficient scale, there is the minimum efficient scale is very large, then the production in the centralized unit is more feasible. This is the main important thing. And the last thing is flexible manufacturing technology and a lean technology, lean production. First of all, we are going to see this term that lean production is a systematic method for eliminating the waste within the manufacturing process. Leans also take into account waste created through the overburden or waste created through the unevenness in the workload. It range of manufacturing technology that are designed to reduce the setup time for complex equipment, increase the utilization of individual machines through better scheduling, and improve quality control at all stages of the manufacturing process. These are the three important benefits of flexible manufacturing technology or the lean production. We are going to discuss these 3 points, technological factors, more in detail in the next lecture. We are just going through them quickly because these are the technological factors. We had to discuss the country factors and the technology factors. And they are interrelated with each other. That's why we had to discuss this thing in this lecture as well. And the next point is mass communication and flexible machine cells. These are the two other concepts that we are going to see more in detail, and we are going to discuss these points in the next lecture. But if we talk with respect to the terms, what does it mean? Production of personalized or custom-tailored goods or the services to meet customer device and changing need at near mass production prices. Production of mass communication, mass customization. Customization means products are built according to the demands of the customers, and those production will be created in the large numbers. That's the mass customization. And flexible machine cell, it allows firms to increase the efficiency by improving the capacity utilization. Just to increase the capacity in a best way of the production machines. This is the flexible machine cells. And this is a really interesting case study of Amazon Kindle. And in this case study they have discussed how the technological factor influence on the production of Amazon's Kindle. And what I expect that you are going to see this case study by yourself, and what you have to do is you have to apply the technological factors that we have done in the last few slides, and apply those technological factors in this case study, and you are going to see how Amazon's production is influenced by those technological factors. Now there are quick 1 or 2 review questions. What allows firms to increase efficiency by improving capacity utilization and reducing work in progress? The first option is mass customization, Six Sigma technology, ISO 9000, and flexible machine cells. Answer of this question is available in the previous slides. If you don't find the answer, just check the book. Okay, now we quickly go through the main points of today's lecture. We have seen broadly, we have seen the strategic pricing, how the firm decide the prices. There are predatory prices. We have discussed the multi-point pricing, the experience curve pricing, and we have seen the dumping of prices. And while we have discussed the concept of why development of the product development is important for the firms. And the next thing we have seen this thing, that why cross-functional team is important, cross-functional across the marketing, R&D, and the production, and building how to build the global capabilities. Now after that we had discussed the interrelation between the production and logistics, how to reduce the cost there, the production and the logistic is helpful, and to improve the quality of the product, how the logistic is important. And the last one we have seen this thing that how the Six Sigma is very beneficial for the improving of the quality of the products. This was the lecture of today. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.